Welcome to the Lawyering Peace Interviews series, where we explore the art of diplomacy and the legal frameworks that underpin peace processes. Join us as we hear from prominent figures who have played pivotal roles as negotiators, diplomats, and lawyers in the quest for peace. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Williams, the president and founder of the Public International Law and Policy Group, and the Rebecca Grazier Professor of Law and International Relations at American University. Now, in this special mini-series, we will be focusing on Syria, a nation that has been at the center of global headlines for recent months. After more than a decade of devastating civil war, the Assad regime has been overthrown, making a seismic shift in Syria and the wider region's political landscape. While this moment has brought a sense of immense hope to many Syrians and the international community, it has also opened a new chapter of challenges. From addressing sectarian divides and rebuilding shattered communities, to managing the rise of new power players and navigating international dynamics, Syria stands at a critical crossroads. Over the next few episodes, we will speak with experts who have been deeply involved in Syria's peace process, all of whom you have heard from before in previous episodes of our podcast. We'll explore their reflections on recent events, lessons learned from past negotiations, and their hopes for Syria's future. Together, we'll discuss what it takes to turn this moment of change into a foundation for lasting peace in Syria. Now, in this very first episode, I am so delighted to be joined by the highly accomplished Hind Kabawat, who joined us in a previous episode to discuss the Geneva talks and the importance of inclusion and justice in peace processes. Hind has played pivotal roles in the Syrian peace negotiations, including serving as the deputy head of the Syrian Negotiation Committee's office in Geneva and as a former member of the High Negotiations Committee. Hind has recently returned from Damascus. Hind is the director of interfaith peace building at the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. She is also the president of Taskakel, a nonprofit women-led peace-building organization of diverse Syrian women working in pursuit of democracy, justice, human rights, and the rule of law in Syria. She played key roles in all 8 rounds of the Geneva peace talks and has an intimate knowledge of the various efforts that have been made to establish genuine peace in Syria. In particular, she is an expert voice on women's inclusion in peace processes and in building democratic states. Hind, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Paul, for hosting me. Thank you so much.
Well, Hind, let's dive right into our conversation. You've just returned from Damascus. We were talking before we went live on this podcast about, you return to your family home, seeing old friends, family, loved ones. What's it like in Damascus, and what are you feeling, and what are you thinking?
Thank you, Paul, for this question. It was very emotional. It's been 14 years I'm away from my home. It's been devastated to be away. It's been very hard for the last 14 years to see how much the Syrian people suffered and the high price they paid for just calling for freedom and democracy. It was a joy to come back to a country without a dictator. It is amazing that we're back to see old friends and family. There is lots of hope. People I can feel in the street. I heard this guy saying, I can now live again, something like this. So generally speaking, everybody is happy and there is atmosphere of hope. But in the same time, many people asking questions, what will happen for the future? There is sanctions for Syria. There is economic problems. Assad regime, when he left, he took all the monies in the bank. There is no electricity. There is no salaries. People are suffering, Paul. There is poverty. The poverty, 80% of the Syrian people are under the poverty level. I've seen poor people in the street of Damascus. I never seen this before. Nevertheless, there is a smile. And I can see there is a hope. Everybody think that now with the opening for the international community, there will be hope for Syria to come back where we want it to be: open, democratic, and economic and social justice for all. So this is what I see.
Well, Hind, one of the major issues in this transition are gender rights, inclusivity, the role of women with intelligent and powerful voices like yourself. Can you give us a sense of, how this is in playing out? And you and I have worked together over the years on so many transitions, and there's always huge value add from the women's perspective, but there isn't a long tradition anywhere around the globe of inclusivity, more so in the last decade or two. How is that playing out in Syria?
First of all, I can see now, after 14 years of struggles for freedom, now there is lots of opportunities. And we can see that now there is kind of space in Syria for discussions, for dialogue. There is many people, they're talking opening in politics, but where is the woman? We have some, of course, now there is more free space. When we did the Women Political Movement Conference, there is no question asked. We did what we want. Nobody checked our speeches, like nothing. But also there is a challenges. And us, we need to always talk about challenges facing women. Of course, we need to think about political representations because we need to be included from the beginning. This is out of questions. We need to have more legal right for us, and we have to know how to protect our women in this legal right. We have to have more business opportunity because many women, they own their small business, they need jobs to continue. We need also safety and security for our women to continue their life. And we need to support them in all the way, in education and economic and business. And we cannot do it if we don't give them some security and sense of safety so they can continue the work. So this is where I see the challenges, but the opportunity is now there is more open for people, women and civil society to open their civil society and start working in Syria in more free and more safe place for them to operate.
Well, Hind, let's pick up on that last comment about civil society. Presumably, during the 50 years of the dictatorship of the Assads, there was very little room, if any, for civil society. Now, in parallel to that, the global civil society movement has been evolving and strengthening, and Syrian civil society has been very active outside of Syria. I imagine civil society organizations just like yours are coming back into Damascus. What's the environment like in Syria, and in particular in Damascus, for political civil society focused on gender inclusion, civil society focused on human rights? Walk us through a little bit what it's like on the ground there for civil society.
First of all, Paul, the civil society now and the women movements are different than 14 years ago. You just said it. In the last 14 years, the women and the civil society were not just sitting in the corner and feeling victimized. They've been working, and they've been working very hard. So saying this, when we talk and we have these discussions about what will be our role in the future, what can we do, this is a big subject. And people are saying, first, we need to increase the women representation. And from the beginning, we cannot leave it to the end. We cannot be consultant. We're not going to be advisor. We're not going to be just sitting there. We want everybody. We want advisor. We want consultant. We want them to be at the table. So we need to increase the women representations. Everybody is talking about this. And we need to support them. We support the young women. We have to think about those discrimination laws against Syrian women not to be fully engaged in the work. We need to have international standards for us to work together We need, first of all, to have a good policy in hand. We need them to be more trained. We have to do capacity building. So all this conversation, Paul, is open now. We can talk about it. I've been invited to be a speaker in many roundtable discussions and to do lectures about this. Every single woman from the audience, from different religion, from different ethnic group, from different age group, they're all together sharing the same vision, sharing the same goal, that we need to be engaged. We need to have political engagement, and we need to think about good educational programs and awareness. We need to be front and working, and most important, to have our word heard, because this is important. And we don't want to be window dressing. We don't want to just being there like, oh yeah, we tick the boxes and we have women there. Women now, you can see after 14 years, they're not the same. We're not just sitting there and wondering what will happen after and who will be writing the history. We are writing the history, Paul. And you can see in the last 14 years, we get so much achieved. Women in the camp, I visited women in the camp when they don't have a school for their kids, they taught their kids in the tent. They're nurses, they're teachers. They're the one in the local council. They've been involved in every aspect. Those women are also detainees, and they're the mother of detainees, and they lost their children. Nevertheless, they never lost hope that one day we will have democracy and freedom. Aren't we giving those women a place to be part of the history of Syria? Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. After all this sacrifice, they need to be there. I have a colleague who lost her husband in the war. She's raising now 4 children. She works 24/7 to raise them. Plus, she's taking extra course for her so she can get better. Aren't we give those women a place in the new Syria? Of course, yes. So this is a struggle. And it is not easy because we got this cultural barriers. They're saying, oh, women are only to teach and to be nurse and to be mothers. Yes, but the point is, Paul, we can do it all. We can teach and we can do everything. Plus, we can be a politician. We can be leaders, and we can be a servant leaders, not like other. We just want to be leaders. We're there for the interest of the country, the interest of the people, not for our interest. So women needs to be front line in the new Syria.
So Hind, with the national dialogue process coming up and with the constitutional process coming up, and I'd like to get your thoughts on those processes in just a little bit. But initially, what are the 3 or 4 key issues that women are focusing on at the moment, or preparing to focus on? Obviously inclusion, the protection of women's rights, those issues. Tell us a little bit more about that. And then other issues that they're identifying as, from their perspective, what is central and what is crucial to this democratic transformation of Syria? Transitional justice, power sharing, education, natural resources. What's in their basket of issues?
In our organization, we did this need assessment and we talked with our women. We got like 3,000 graduates. They're all focusing on 3 things. And I'm very proud of their thinking like this. Number 1, transitional justice. They think that transitional justice is the main things we need to tackle and start working on it seriously. And as a matter of fact, we started doing online courses we just have 400 registered students, a new one, to learn about transitional justice, women from all around Syria. So they want to think about transitional justice because they see that there will be no future if we don't have a proper accountability. We want to think about what will happen next. We don't want to have revenge. We don't want to have sectarian war. This all things that Syrian women are thinking. Number 2, they want to think about education. We have ruined city. And when we're driving near Damascus, there is cities are ruined completely. Assad regime, between the chemical war and the barrel bombs and everything, ruined the village completely. The refugee, they want to come back. So this is also one of the priority of the women. We want the refugee to come back. We need to do reconstructions. We need to have a proper education. And the most important, to lift the sanction. This sanction is being created for this dictatorship regime. So now, if I want to get back the refugee to get back to their city, we need to lift the sanctions so we can do reconstruction and early recovering, and we need to build the school and get back the country together. So they're thinking, to summarize, transition justice, lifting the sanction, and education. This is important. When we talk about lifting the sanction, of course, it's reconstruction, the country. And we need to get back the country as it is. So every single woman, they think that it is important not to watch. We need to work on this. So they are advocating everywhere to have better education and to lift the sanction, and then to have a proper presentation for women at the table.
Well, Hind, a number of the organizations that you've worked with have had relationships with women's organizations and other civil society in Libya, Sudan, Yemen, Tunisia, Egypt, other places where there's been the Arab Spring or an attempt at transition to democracy. What are some of the lessons learned, both in terms of women's inclusion in these processes? And as you know, with PLPG, we worked very intensively with the women's group on the constitutional process in Libya. We advised the women's group on the national dialogue and the constitutional process in Yemen. So they're there and they're very active. What have you learned from the successes and failures of those groups? And then also separately, anything on the substantive issues that you've identified: transitional justice, education, sanctions / reconstruction. What's worked and what hasn't worked in Libya, Sudan, Yemen, Egypt over the years?
I salute my sisters in all those countries. And it's breaking my heart to see them working hard, and I don't see a proper representation for them at the table, like what we did see in Sudan. They've been working so hard. They've been in all demonstration. In the end, at the table, they don't have any presence. So it is very sad, and we don't want this to repeat in Syria. But I think, and just thinking now, I think the lack of strong institutions and lots of foreign intervention and the lack of democracy and political and economic instability, and plus the corruption in this country, the culture of the country, didn't help a lot the women in those countries. And of course, all leaders in those countries, they were thinking about their interests, not about their country's interests. And here you see the different point. When you put women in charge, they think about the country. They think about the interests of the nations. It is not about my leadership and I want to be the leader. They believe in the servant leaders. So this is why women, they need to be at the table from the beginning. And of course, if I look to the future of Syria and look forward, what we all hope is, you just say that bright future. But I think what we can do also, this lesson highlight, there is lots of complexity of democratic transition, and of course the need of comprehensive strategy for us. This is important. And then when we want to talk about national dialogue, and this is, of course, and we're thinking about why this has happened to other women in the other country, because of the dynamic there. Do we have it now? Yes, maybe we have it. But now, since we know the problem, we can start from the beginning to control this and be in charge of this. So this is what I'm hoping for, that we can start taking our place as soon as possible and have our women coalition together and working together toward what we think will be better for the Syrian society, not only for women, but for the Syrian society. As now you ask me about the national dialogue. Of course, we need to recognize that it is an opportunity for us, Paul. Since 1950, we didn't have any national dialogue. All these constitutions or law changes was one side, the Baas Party changed it without even asking the people. So this is a time for the Syrian national dialogue to be aspirations of everyone in Syria, to hear their voices, especially women. And then we need those women to be included in the economic and political life. This is the moment of transition that we need to get their voices from the beginning and learn about the culture of strong institutions in politics. We cannot have any stability for country if we don't have a gender equality and justice. So from the beginning, we're calling that if this is the time when we have the national dialogue and to have everybody at the table, to have women. If we cannot do it in quotas, we need to have at least half of women, at least we need to get the quota, the minimum of 30%. Without women at the national dialogues, we're going to lose so much. And we did see this in other countries. So we're calling for this. We're supporting these ideas. I know many people, they are supporting this. And also, let's not forget the spoilers. We have the problem of the spoilers in the other country, like you mentioned. So we have the international intervention, and then we have the spoilers. And those people, those two reasons can spoil the systems, and they won't let the women be at the table. So this is also, we need to be careful, and we need to work on it from the beginning.
Let's drill down on that a little bit, because you touched on something that I find very, very perplexing. When we worked with the PLPG, the National Dialogue in Yemen, amazing participation, strong leadership from the women's community. 4 of the members of the Constitution Drafting Committee were women, and they were experts on transitional justice, power sharing, constitutional, et cetera. But then as it moved out of national dialogue and constitution drafting, and same with Libya, and it moved into more traditional politics, they were then excluded. And I was very perplexed. I thought that it was a sea change, that it was irreversible with this gender inclusion in these other places, these other countries. But I was shocked at how quickly that melted away. Have you been thinking? I know there's so many things you're thinking about today. You're not thinking about sort of after the constitutional process and after the national dialogue. But when those governance structures begin to solidify, I've seen a shocking degree of melt of women's participation. Thoughts on that?
I didn't really think about it deeply. But I can tell you, Paul, this is also the story of our lives in the Middle East. This is what happens usually. Of what we do, you do all this hard work, then you'll see yourself excluded. Let's think about the Palestinian Authority, how much the women work so hard, then we didn't see any woman in the Palestinian Authority in charge. And you can see this in so many. When it comes to politics, there is the tribes, and there is the male dominations, and there is the corruption in politics, and they will have women excluded. So you do your work, you draft the constitution, you do all this homework, bravo, you're amazing, go back home. This is exactly what's happening, and it happened in so many cases. So the question for the Syrian women, are we going to repeat this, or we're going to change? And this is why myself and others, we're going back to Damascus to stay there and try to help, because we want our young women and female colleagues to be strong, to be resilient. And yes, we're ready to work, but also we're ready to work on politics, because women will not only have a brain, but also we have a good heart. We think about the people. And today, Syria will need politicians with big hearts, like Mandela, like Gandhi. This is what we need now, like Martin Luther King. We need politicians who think about their countries, and we're ready to do this.
Well, Hind, you've been very generous with your time. I just have 2 more questions for you. And one is still on this question of constitution and national dialogue, stepping back and looking at this process that Syria is about to undertake, sussing out the views of millions upon millions of Syrians, and then drafting a proper democratic constitution that creates durable peace in Syria. What are some of the big picture challenges or opportunities that you're seeing for the people of Syria as Syria begins to move into this national dialogue and constitutional process?
First of all, When we're going to think about national dialogue, we have to start with the trust building. We've been 14 years in a conflict. We didn't have any dialogue among us. There's regions, there is cities, and ethnic group. They never have a proper dialogue. Before the conflict, the Ba'ath party didn't encourage this dialogue between us. And after the conflict, it happened that we've been divided. The most important things to start with the national dialogue, to start a real dialogue between people to people. So before we start with the big national dialogue, we need to do small dialogue, small round table, small discussion. And I think this is what's happening. And this is what I did see in Damascus. People start, not Damascus, in Homs, in Safita, in Sweda. There is lots of lecture now, like lots of round table discussion. This is important. This is what will give us a clear objective, what we really want from this national dialogue. And we need also to prepare ourselves of what we really want from this, what kind of social contract we really need. And we need to think about sustainable process. We don't want to start and later let the spoilers ruin this thing. So we need sustainable process. How we're going to do it? Are we going to get an external support or not? Are we going to facilitate it, or do we need somebody to do it for us? So all this, we need to think about it and talk about it. And who will be representing who? Are we going to have 1,500 people to represent the millions of Syrians? What about the refugees? What about the IDP? Are they back? What about the diaspora? They did work so hard also in this revolution. Are they going to have their voice or not? This is also a question. And this will give us the importance to have the pre-consultation phase. And also we need to have some capacity building for many before we start the big national dialogue. If we don't do it together, and we don't have to do it like one by one, we can start that dialogue, we can start the workshop, we can do the capacity building, we can do the consultation phase. Then we start thinking about what kind of agenda we want, what kind of subject we want. Like I like this idea about streams, what kind of streams we can have. Economics, legal, transitional justice, accountability. So how inclusive we can be inclusive. Are we going to think about every single group in Syria to be at the table? Yes, it is an opportunity for us to do it. And I think this kind of question, we need to start thinking about it loudly and not to talk with ourselves, to talk with others and see what is the best way we can do. Are we going to include religious people? Absolutely. Youth? Yes. Teachers? Of course. Military armed group? Yes. So we need to have this conversation together to make a good decision, because it is a lifetime opportunity to have this, and to have a new constitution can fit our desire and hope. And because after all the sacrifice and the price we paid in the last 14 years, we deserve to have a good constitution and good institutions.
When you describe your blueprint for national dialogue and constitutional process, it makes me very encouraged that the lessons have been learned from other peace processes, positive and negative, to pull over to Syria. You and your colleagues have been thinking through, what works and what doesn't work in constitutional processes and national dialogue. Well, Hind, last question is, are there any other lessons learned that you'd like to share with our audience? As I mentioned in the introduction, you were heavily involved in the Geneva negotiations, which was a peace process and negotiations with the Assad regime, but you were able to see how negotiations within the Syrian opposition delegation, the degree to which women were included, the complexity of these issues. Is there anything you've learned from that experience of being at the core of these peace negotiations that are transferable to these future negotiations about building a durable and democratic Syria?
The time in Geneva with the 8th round, it wasn't easy. It was a very painful experience, because it's not only we have to negotiate, also we did see our Syria is being bombed by the barrel bombs, by chemicals. We did see the siege, starvation. So lesson learned about, we have lots of emotion and it's been very hard on us. Nevertheless, we never give up because we need to continue, never, with all this painful situation, Paul, we were ready to continue to serve. You as a negotiator, you as a politician, your role is to serve the people. It is not about your interest, about your title, about how great you are. You're there to serve the people. End of stories, number one. Number two, be careful. There is lots of spoilers. I learned my lesson in Geneva, and we keep learning this. During this negotiation, you're going to recognize so many spoilers from your own group or from the others or from the international. Your job is to continue the work, nevertheless, all the spoilers, what they're doing, because in the end, you're serving the people. They are your boss. You don't go right or left. So spoilers, it is important to know the risk of them and how you can overcome. The more you have civil society and good people working in your team, there will be less damage for the process. Number three, never, ever give up hope. In the darkest days, in the darkest time, when everybody starts saying, oh, we're going to normalize with Assad, Assad is staying, I always wake up in the morning and I listen to this word of, oh, let's normalize with him. That's it. Live. He's not going to go anywhere. I wake up, I say, no. I'm going to wake up because I want to serve those people, those women and civil society, because you never give up hope. So in the last years of working in peace, the main advice for every peacemaking in this world is never give up hope, never. And this, you work hard, you dream about the freedom, but while you're dreaming about the freedom, you have to work hard for this. And for women, it's not difficult. We work hard, we learn how to work hard, and we learn how to have thin skin, resist all the spoilers we face in our world.
Well, Hind, that's a great note on which to end. Hope for the future of Syria, hope for the effective inclusion of women and gender perspectives in this democratic transition, and hope, quite frankly, for Syria to serve as a model for other states that are still grappling with their transition to democracy or transition to peace. And so I wanted to thank you. I know how busy you are. Your time is in high demand, given all the things you do and your incredible skill set and your incredible depth of relationships throughout Syria. So I'm very grateful that you've spent this last hour with us sharing your thoughts and your hopes and dreams and aspirations for Syria. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, Hind.
Thank you.